First of all, however, I do want to think about the nation's, what is called the nation's erasure. I have in front of me a great article by John Kackelman. He's an attorney in the state of Alabama, and this will appear on my website, which is American Liberty with Bill Lockwood, and the article will appear there. So this is John Kackelman's material, and but he has laid it out as succinctly as I think and powerfully as anybody can do. And he's talking about, of course, the dangerous state in which our nation finds itself right now. He tells us a failed nation is the consequence of a citizen's or of the citizenry's complacency. A corrupt nation is the product of corrupt politicians and bureaucrats. A nation's erasure is the divine judgment on the population bowing submissively and surrendering their inalienable rights to a totalitarian group. It is the choice of citizens. An undeniable historical fact is that there is a constant rerun in civilization's chronicles. Nations rise and fall because of the citizen population. And once the citizens resign their individual rights and freedoms, then the nation's foundations crack and crumble. And that is, once again, the choice of citizens. When the citizens choose silence over common sense questioning, when the citizens relinquish all choices to the state and render foolish compliance to the inanest mandates, when the body politic is run by authorities viewing themselves as elitists, a nation's erasure is an absolute consequence. The formula is absolute. National calamity results. That is the choice, again, of citizens. The history of the national rise and fall of world empires has one constant factor. The citizens did nothing. They chose to allow the decline of the national conscience and urged the national consciousness to be desensitized. They sat in silence while their nation imploded within, from corruption within, in the highest levels of governing, and accepted the fall as the enemy outside completed the nation's destruction. This is a fact. It is an absolute fact. It can be denied, but it cannot be evaded. It may be forestalled, but it is certain. An illustration is the lament of the Old Testament prophet Jeremiah, who witnessed the fall of his beloved city, Jerusalem. The national demise followed the same historic pattern that we've been talking about. The national fall was, once again, the choice of the citizens. The prophet lamented, "How lonely sits the city that once had so many people. She has become like a widow who was once great among the nations. She who was a princess among the provinces has become now a forced laborer. She has no one to comfort her. All who pursued her have overtaken her in the midst of her distress. It is bitter for her. Her adversaries have become her masters. Her splendor is gone. It is nothing, or is it nothing to all of you who pass by this way?" The fall of Jerusalem in the Old Testament was the choice of citizens. Listen again to the prophet's heartbreaking query as he asked the people who walked by the ruins of that once great nation, "Is it nothing to all of you who pass by this way?" When the citizens become complacent, the political leaders become corrupt, and all personal liberties are surrendered to totalitarian mandates, then national erasure is assured. Consider for a moment the erasure of Germany, the historic erasure of a great nation from the recent time that would be the fall of Germany. The nation's citizens surrendered to the controlling politicians, and disaster was ignited. The extremism of Germany's political forces resulted in the nation's erasure. As one person noted, Germany died in the Second World War. That is the tragic truth, and although the German nation continues to exist today, what the German people lost with the war goes far beyond the obvious material and human losses. It was the erasure of an entire nation. The same thing is true regarding Russia. Volumes of material validate the erasure of Russia as a great nation. Once vying for the number one spot in the world empire, the nation fall, or the national fall, has been a historic rerun of the same thing that we're talking about, the erasure of a nation, this complacency of citizenry. The amazing fall of the USSR was the product of a number of factors, eventually bringing about its dissolution. The fragmentation of the one world power continues today as its elite rulers attempt to crush all opposition, and we're seeing it right here in America. If you want a clear illustration of how a police state functions, look at the current affairs in Russia. This is how a police state functions. The most prominent opposition figure to Vladimir Putin was Alexei Navalny. He's been found guilty of fraud and contempt of court. That is, Vladimir Putin seeks the courts on him. The charges are only validated only by the state's prosecution and intended only to silence the vocal opposition. Not surprising is the state's verdict that such opposition deserves 9 years sentence in prison. The intimidation tactic is well communicated to others thinking of opposition. The rest of the people quail in fear. The reality of a police state, and by the way, mentioning the Soviet Union and the police state that is there, the opposition to Vladimir Putin, does it sound familiar? The police state going after the opposition party. It should. We have it going on in America right now. The reality of a police state persecuting its critics is amply illustrated. Another account of Russia's far-reaching intimidation is supplied by the mysterious death of a prominent critic of Vladimir Putin in Washington's West End. This is drawing fury from Kremlin's best-known global detractors, but scant notice in Washington, where police say they do not suspect foul play behind Dan Rappaport's fall from luxury apartment building the night of August 14th. The erasure of the United States of America. It is going on even as we speak. Our great nation cannot escape the inevitability of the historic constant. The historic constant is undeniable. If the nation's citizens become so complacent and the political leaders become so corrupt and all personal liberties are surrendered to totalitarian mandates, the national erasure is assured. So where are we in the United States? We are fast coming to a police state, which is what we've talked about, which is what we've warned about since the day that this program was conceived. There's hope of rescue, but the citizens have to come out of complacency. We have evil going on in the top echelons of the United States government. Surely not every law enforcement agent in the federal, state, and local agencies are compromised. There are those in positions who can step forward and speak out. But right now, we have a very few number that are whistleblowers coming forward to expose the corruption, the illegality, the evil schemes, and subversions that are taking place in the halls of government right now. And before this year is out, you're going to see much more of it coming forward as people try to get rid of Donald Trump. They don't want him to run anymore at all. What we're seeing is corruption at its highest level, and it's at its deepest level also. The raid on Mar-a-Lago is exactly what I'm talking about. You're witnessing an FBI that is so corrupt, it needs to be simply closed shop. It needs to be erased itself before this country is erased. That's what needs to take place. We need to get rid of the FBI. The corruption is too deep, and it cannot be reformed by putting another guy on top of it. That's what's taking place in America. So who's going to step forward to expose the corruptions, the illegalities, the compromises that are plaguing our nation and fueling our erasure? Who will have the courage to be bold enough and to be a heroic figure to stand up to the corruption that is taking place? The constitutional principles upon which this country were founded, they're absolutely gone. They have already been erased, and we're now racing ourselves to the bottom. We need to do something very quickly in America.